Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And he is on this side of the Atlantic still, just somewhere in the vicinity of between the West Coast and the East Coast. Jacob Prash, how are you?
Better than I deserve to be, as usual. Praise Jesus. Aren't you glad he's coming?
Amen. Good to see you, brother. God bless you. And David Lister, not too far from where Jacob is.
Yeah, he's just above my head. We were raptured, I'd run into him.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, Jacob's always above my head, too. He often speaks, and it's way above me and above my head. Well, welcome, David. So blessed to have you. So blessed to have Jacob. And, of course, closer to me, Jay in the control rooms.
Hello, greetings from just a few blocks away from the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, which hopefully someday will be shut down.
Yes.
I guess people still visit, and still people visit that place, and it gets packed summertime.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, even the outrageous prices, still people go there. It's. I thought it was a bad economy, but anyway, what do I know? And it's already Saturday where he's at, always ahead of us in more ways than one. Davey, how are you, brother?
Pretty good, thanks, dear brother. Good to be here.
Blessed to have you as well. God bless you guys. And thank you for joining us, Catching Up with Jacob. And we got a lot of stuff today, lots of stuff. We're going to talk about the Lord and his return, but there are events that happen. There are signs that he is coming, and he comes with these signs, and you could see them in the world, on the earth. You could see them in the church. You could see them in Israel. And eventually these signs will be in the heavens, a sign of the Son of Man coming. So we're going to be talking about that today. Jacob and David, any thought now that the fellowship drive number 2 has been completed? Any thoughts, any reactions, anything that you might want to share in terms of how it struck you, how it affected you, and also how you interacted with the believers there, and what you thought about their condition and the need for Moriel to be a bigger part in their lives?
I basically see it as the Holy Spirit continuing to build an underground church that's going to be able to stand in the future. There's so many Christians that are scattered about who cannot find biblically based churches where they live, and they need to connect with each other and meet in small groups and homes and so forth. So that is the primary reason we're doing what we're doing. But we would encourage people to do it without relying on Moriel coming to town. People need to form relationships with other like-minded believers who are Christ-centered and biblically based, and begin meeting in homes if you cannot find a good church near where you live. That is the basic situation. Persecution is coming. In some cases, it's already arrived, in places like Canada particularly. We need to understand the times we live in and what's coming before the Lord returns, and prepare for it now. So that's the reason we're doing what we're doing.
Amen. David, any thoughts now that it's concluded phase 2?
Well, I just want to say I'm very thankful to people, and they give testimony. They talk about Moriel and how so many of them have gotten grounded or came out of false teaching, which is a really good thing. And we're very grateful for their kind comments on that. And it's great seeing people, that people from California moved to the East Coast.
Hi there, folks.
Catching up with them again was really nice. And everyone is just, they know times are getting tough. They know time is getting short. They're asking for prayer for their unsaved loved ones. They feel a sense of urgency, and they want to take these prophetic truths that they're hearing and apply them to their lives, and to live like a purified life, getting ready for the return of our King, so.
Amen. Praise the Lord. And such wonderful, wonderful believers that you guys met, and phase number 2. And you guys are coming out here on the West Coast. You're going to be with me pretty soon. Jacob, you're here 20th and 21st. Looking forward to it.
20 and 21st Christian Church of Devore with Pastor Marco Quintana. If you visit the Moriel website, moriel.org, I'm also scheduled to be in Baltimore and in New York City before returning to Britain. In Britain, we have John Haller coming over to join us for the Moriel Scotland Conference on the 16th and 17th of June at Gartmore in Scotland. Details are also available on the moriel.org website. So wherever you are, we hope that we're near you. Please come see us.
God bless you, Jacob. We'll look forward to having you, having David, and of course we'll hang out with Jay too. And if we just find a way to get Davey here, that'll be that'll be really, really. And perhaps we'll make that happen on the other side, Davey. On the other side.
Awesome.
Of the
great.
Pacific. That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Praise the Lord. I think that's it in terms of announcements. Please get a hold of our podcast. Jay, you want to talk about podcast real quick, just to let everybody know what we're doing and what we have in store for them as well?
Sure. As you know, we can be found on Podchasers, Pocket Cast, Deezer, and also Amazon, as well as many other platforms. This week we have Catching Up with Jacob 127. We'll post on the 4th. On the 5th, we have Friday, Jacob Prash and the Seven Churches of Revelation. On 5-6, we have the Weekend Bible Study with Jacob. A little sleep, a little slumber. On the 7th, we have you, Pastor Marco, with the Book of Colossians, Prevention Against Deception. And then on 5-8, we have this episode will drop on podcasts, episode 128. And on 5-9, we have a lesson with David Evangelizing Workshop.
All right.
5-10.
Lots of good stuff.
Yep. Please make yourself available to all of those.
Since podcasts came along, I don't know, the early 2000s or so, just about mid 2000s, and become popular now, it's such an easy way to share lots of information. And of course, the reason why we share lots of studies and information like that is for the purpose of causing transformation in people's lives. You can get a lot of information on podcasts, but if it's not transforming you, and we believe these messages are the transforming power of Christ through the Word of God taught by faithful men to really make an impact in your life. And you can share them with your friends, with your family, share them with people you met, share them with people that you care about their salvation. Not only witness to them, but sometimes there's another witness that you can share with podcasts, and you can tell them how much the Lord loves them, how much the Lord cares for them, how much He died, how much He paid the price for them, and that He's coming back soon. So these things have to be part and parcel of our arsenal in terms of sharing. And it's a good way of doing it. Podcasts have made it very, very simple to share lots of information. But I always make the case. Information, there's a lot of that. Saturation, that can become a problem. But if it leads to transformation, that's what we want. We want the transforming power of the Word of God. So thanks, Jay, on the podcast. Really good stuff. Ever growing, ever increasing. We thank you for watching on different platforms. MorielTV.org, Moriel.tv, Rumble, Telegram. You name it, we're there. Vimeo. Of course, we're on YouTube and Facebook. And we'll be jumping off of Facebook and YouTube to Backstage, which is a part of the show that we can't talk about it on those platforms. And we'll be on Rumble. We'll be on the other ones. We'll be definitely on Rumble taking questions. So send your questions in. Start thinking about the questions you may have. It's an opportunity to ask Jacob, David, questions that you may have related to the topics at hand, related to what's going on. And sometimes people ask us, where did Jacob speak on this? Where did Jacob talk about that? We usually send them a link or a way to find some of the studies that are more in depth. So thank you for joining us, and we'll be doing catching up. I think that's all the announcements we have. So let's get started, gentlemen. Jacob and David, Jay and Davey, let's get on with catching up. Jacob, we'll start with you. Banks are fine, says the Fed. Banks are fine, says the Treasury. The bank says, we're fine. Wall Street says, sell everything now because everything's on fire. They lied to us about safe and effective methods of medicine. Now, obviously, it was unbelievably bad. Now they say it's safe and effective to keep your money in the bank, and banks are falling apart. The collapse is in. We've seen them already. Third largest one happened this week with First Republic. $532 billion in assets among the three banks that failed. Jacob, is this it's a contagion in? Are we in for more pain as more and more banks get swallowed up by the big fish?
We are absolutely in for more, but this is not purely an American phenomenon by any means. Credit Suisse obviously went down the tubes, but I've been warning for some time. Be careful if Deutsche Bank hits the wall. Deutsche Bank is in serious trouble, more serious than the EU or the German government is admitting, more serious than Deutsche Bank is admitting. If Deutsche Bank hits the wall, duck for cover. Now, here in the United States, what you basically have is the ridiculous situation of, with Biden's deficit spending and the Federal Reserve printing money, quantitative easing, just basically printing money because the tax revenues are not sufficient to fund the waste of the Biden administration. They have a problem. That's inflation. It was inevitable. They caused it. So how do you control inflation? You raise interest rates. What does that do? When you raise interest rates, it causes recession, but it does something else. It makes debentures, bond prices collapse. So by raising the interest rates, the same Fed is causing bond prices to collapse. So what happens when this takes place? T-bills and other government-issued debentures particularly, that banks put their money into because it seems secure, are now losing value. What you saw happen with Silicon Valley Bank or First Republic Bank, that is a result of the same policies of the same Fed who are now forcing banks to merge into bigger ones.
Yes.
They caused the problem, and they are in no position to solve it. Interest rates have just gone up day before yesterday by another 0.25%. This makes bond prices go down, and these banks are holding bonds. They're holding treasury bills. Now, that also has international ramifications for foreign nations holding the treasury bills. What's going to happen? There's going to be more trouble. You have a situation where you have basically people not just incompetent, but they seem to be stupid. Janet Yellen is a stupid woman. She's a stupid woman, just a stupid old lady. You've got Powers, who's a joke. The very people responsible are now trying to manage something of their own creation. All they can do is raise the interest rates to help keep a lid on the inflation. And they have to do that. They have to strengthen the dollar because of the threat to the dollar from foreign currencies as the world currency reserve. They have to do it. They've dug themselves into this. And it's amazing to me how the public can't see it. There are people who will vote Democrat again. There are people who will vote for, they're that stupid. Here's a shovel, dig your own grave, and they will do it.
JP Morgan Chase, it's now the owner of First Republic. They basically took it on. And with the help of FDIC, $50 billion credit line, and they're taking on $173 billion in loans and $30 billion in security as well. David, it just seems like we're less banks, less regional banks. We've heard today, PacWest, Western Alliance, Metropolitan Bank, all in trouble, halted trading. Are these next?
Well, we could well see more runs because nobody really knows which one's next. They're guessing at who's going to fail next. And some of it is coming because individuals are scared, so they're running to the banks. They take their money out of the bank, and the banks can't fund those deposits elsewhere. And so it can be a self-perpetuating problem, because of fear. And Jacob's right. The Fed has created this problem, and they're always walking this tightrope to keep us from going into a recession. And they hope it will, but they're trying to calm people by saying, look, your money's insured to $250,000. If you have a wife and you have joint accounts, it's 500,000. But they're actually doing more than that. They're actually insuring all the deposits.
Yeah,
So
like they
they're
did with
printing money. Well, they don't print money anymore. They're just making more zeros and ones available to the banks. So, and just so you know, right now, Chase Bank has $3.7 trillion in assets after buying Republic. Plus, they have a $50 billion line of credit. Pretty nice. I wish somebody lend me $50 billion. You know.
Question
But,
real quick, Marco.
yeah.
I just have one quick question. I'm not the greatest with finance, but has anybody addressed the elephant in the room of toxic loans to people who can't afford? Or are we actually going the other direction where, if you have a lower credit score, you get a better loan? I mean, are we going to address what's really the problem, or are we just going to, throw money at it and pretend that that's going to make a solution?
Keep throwing money at the problem until it goes away. It was that Biden administration's new policy to basically penalize people with high credit score.
That's
and
right.
give a more favorable loans to people with lower credit score, which it goes against any logic, any reason. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, they're trying to put, like, if you have a very good credit rating, 800, something like that, you would be paying $40 or $50 more a month, which then they could put it on these bad loans. But look, there's so many bad loans out there. It's the value of houses has not gone up. People owe so much money, and we went right back to the 2008 problem. People were getting in over their heads, and banks were lending to people that are not necessarily credit worthy, and also they were allowing just 100% loans, 95% loans, things like this. So you have these high notes, and we're getting some layoffs now. The Fed's already said that there's going to be more and more layoffs, and so this could make another 2008. As you know, we've already had more banks collapse money-wise just out of 3 banks than we did in all of 2008. So a lot of money floating around.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one more question, actually.
Okay.
One more question. So the private sector is going to lay off people, the parts that generate income. Has there been any layoffs for government?
No, they're hiring.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear.
That's okay. They're increasing their payroll. They can't get enough people, according to the Interior Secretary.
Gotcha.
Oh, did you hear that? Yeah, did you hear that one? That was a doozy. We can't hire enough people. There's 2 jobs for every American.
Yeah.
And only maybe in the government there is, Morgan Stanley's preparing to cut 3,000 jobs.
Yep.
Among many other jobs, senior management, et cetera, et cetera. There's blood in the water, Jacob. Sharks are circling. Are we going to end up with 3 banks, 4 banks, 5 banks?
We're going to end up with about a half dozen major banks in the United States. About a half dozen. That's all. If there are the banks, they will be owned by the bigger ones. There'll be subsidiaries of the bigger ones, which is something that goes on in Britain. But that's what you're going to be left with. You're going to have forced mergers. The other thing is what they did with the subprime lending with Fannie and Freddie, for which Barney Frank, Chris Dodd, and Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton, and the former mayor of the former governor of New York, what was his name? The brothers, Cuomo. They were largely responsible for those things. And now they're tinkering or tampering with Fannie and Freddie again, as you say, by penalizing people with a high credit rating to reward people with a low credit rating. You work hard to maintain a good credit rating, a good credit score, and you save enough to make a decent sized down payment on a house. You have to be penalized for doing that in order to reward people who've not done that.
Yeah.
That is what it basically comes to. The rich will always get richer under the Democrats. They try to make believe that's a Republican phenomenon. No, the banksters are Democrats. It's the middle class who gets it in the back.
Yeah. There's another big
yeah.
elephant in the room: commercial real estate.
Yes, that's
that's
going to go.
Commercial real estate, since COVID and the work at home thing, lots and lots of buildings are empty in New York, San Francisco. Buildings, a whole building was $100 million building in San Francisco was in a fire sale, and then they didn't get any bidders. So you have all these commercial real estates everywhere.
I would not be surprised if you're going to have this empty commercial space and skyscrapers in Midtown Manhattan are going to be turned into condos.
For homeless people on the public dole.
Yeah.
Wasn't De Blasio buying some of that stuff, Jacob, when the whole shutdown in New York? He was basically taking over some of the hotels and properties like that, and just buying them.
Making the tax and handing the taxpayer the bill.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So that's part and parcel. The other thing that was really interesting, JP Morgan has a what they called a digital coin already, JPM coin, which is fascinating to me that they're going to be issuing it to their depositors, and it's going to be worth something. I don't know if it's going to be a 1-to-1 with the dollar, but you could see that their solution is always go to the blockchain, go to the digital currency.
Yes.
Jacob, we're going to end up with 5 or 6 banks. Most people are going to be in those banks. It's nationalized, and you have at least in America, you may not have any other solution but to be in those banks and be given some kind of currency on a digital blockchain.
And you're going to have something that took place in the United States up until the 1860s, something that Abraham Lincoln tried to move against when he established the Secret Service. Banks issued their own notes. Banks issued their own notes. We're going to revert to that, only instead of it being notes, it is going to be digital.
Are they going to be able to trade it with one another, Jacob, based on the history, be able to trade it, it'll be worth something?
What happened with Bitcoin? The only thing is the establishment couldn't control Bitcoin, so they don't like it. But something they can control is entirely different.
Yeah. So we have major bankruptcies this year, 70 already major bankruptcies, which is overshadowed already 2020.
And many of them in the financial sector. Many of them in the financial sector.
Now, the White House response to this was to, at least for the Interior Secretary, Debbie Haaland, to find more jobs. Now, she says with the senator, she was before the Senate, that there's plenty of jobs, almost two jobs for every American. They can't find enough people to work. Obviously, she's probably referring to government jobs or menial jobs that won't be able to pay anything because the inflation is so high. She says it's better to get rid of jobs than to save the planet. She wants to save the planet rather than keep jobs in America. Even if the rest of the world doesn't do it, she's going to have this green agenda. It is from the White House to destroy, in my opinion, the economy for the green agenda. Jacob, this administration, it is hell-bent, seemingly purposely, destroying the economy.
Yes. Well, she's again, like Janet Yellen, she is a personally very stupid woman. She's a very stupid woman. She could not answer basic questions from Senator Hawley, things that she should have known to be in her position. She just doesn't know what she's appointed because she's a liberal woman and a political bureaucrat, and that's why she has a job. Not because she's qualified for it. She is eminently not qualified for it. She's also just stupid. You listen to she doesn't know how to think intelligently.
She
She doesn't know how to rationally debate anything. And that's typical. That's typical of the kind of people that the Biden administration hires. But I agree with you. There may be people on a higher level who just manipulate these people like pieces on a chessboard. Do the thinking, and they have an agenda that is globalist. Somehow saving the environment. I assure you, the environmental standards of the United States for the mining of everything from nickel to cobalt to precious earth metals. The environmental standards in the United States are much higher than the ones in China. China is environmentally reckless. I've been there enough times to see what they do. The pollution is unbelievable. Yet they say they're saving the planet by exporting these jobs and these industries to China. They are not saving the planet, they're catalyzing its destruction. But again, you're dealing with stupid people.
Yeah, she didn't even know that China is the largest exporter of cobalt, lithium, and graphite, which is what you need for cars, electrical cars. And there's a mandate now by the Biden administration for the military to go to electric vehicles, for the public to go to electric vehicles, right into the hands of China. Seems so bizarre.
Well, how can you believe that Biden is not on China's payroll? With the money that he's given to Biden's son, when Biden lied about not benefiting from his son's business activities, which he does, obviously, he was caught lying. When he let that reconnaissance balloon fly over sensitive strategic bases and did nothing about it until it finished its mission in sending the data back to China, the reconnaissance data back to China, how can you believe, or at least not question, is Biden a Chinese asset? Is Biden, compromised by China? Look at what he does. Now, that to a degree was true of Obama as well, with the solar panels, but nothing like what you have with Biden.
That's right. So, David, what's the answer to this? The nation seems to have an answer. The nations see the westernized craziness of Europe, England, the U.S., Australia, and they say, well, we're just going to jump over to the BRICS. We're jumping over to China, Russia, South Africa, Brazil, and we're going to make our bed there. Is that the answer to this economic destruction that we see in the world? Because Jacob's right. It is a world thing. It is a worldwide thing.
It's a temporary thing. I mean, they're not going to be able to do what they need. China's not geared up to make the type of, to be able to totally get the world the supplies they need. And leaving America out of the equation it's going to hurt America, but it'll also hurt the GDP of all these countries. They'll all go down. We'll all go down with this type of thinking, from the Interior Department to all the State Department, all of these people. The use of climate change as the investing way to go is really just a transfer of wealth from roughly $86 trillion to the Z and millennial generations. They don't know how to handle it. Don't worry. The government's ready to handle it for you. We'll just take it.
It is fascinating. Just to step back a little bit, Jacob, it is fascinating to me seeing the world economic system changing right before our eyes. I don't know. Yes. I don't want to see it live, but it is fascinating to experience that. I wasn't around when the Nixon did this. I wasn't around when Brentwood and how it happened. But we're seeing it now. Jacob, just look back at it and put it in comparison to what you saw in 71. And obviously before that with Brentwood, and how the world is going to change. But now you have an element of the last day of the age, and you also have the element of technology and how that plays a role in the new economic system that the world seems to be embarking.
The big change in the Nixon era was when he basically defaulted on the dollar, took it off the gold standard, and did not handle the transition very well. I think you mean Bretton Woods. That was after World War II, in which the dollar became the basis of the world currency reserve. Well, what they're doing is they're eroding the credibility of the dollar. Fortunately, the Chinese economy is in more trouble than the United States is. It's well hidden, but it's in more trouble than the United States is. It is only because these other economies are in worse trouble that the dollar is still here. BRICS in itself is not going to go anywhere in the long term. There's too many problems, including the conflict between China and India. So that's not the case. But the dollar is only there because the others are worse. They have no alternative yet. They're trying to make one. But the irresponsible policies of the Federal Reserve and of the administration are not doing the dollar any favor. Again, they have to continue to raise interest rates to strengthen the dollar against other currencies. It's not just the inflation. They're forced to do this to maintain the position of the dollar. But who's going to pay for this? Ultimately, the American people are going to pay for it. The American public. Now, if there is somebody, if they voted for Biden or they voted for Obama and they suffer economic hardship, they have no right to complain. They got what they voted for. My concern is for the overall good of the nation and the decent people who are not subhuman in their political thinking, who realize what Obama and Biden are. That is the problem. I'd also point out, though, that despite the fact he did many good things that most of us would agree with, Mr. Trump did nothing about the deficits. He did nothing about the deficits. Ronald Reagan made the deficits worse. Ronald Reagan looted Social Security. I don't see a political solution to these problems that an election is going to make a difference. It'll be like what's happened in Holland. Well, the people who are for the rights of farmers and of the public had an election victory, but it's not changed anything.
No, didn't matter.
They're basically almost intimidating people into selling their farms to reduce the amount of aggregable land in a country in Europe with very efficient farming system. The globalists are going to do what they want. And I don't see any simple political solution. There will, of course, eventually be one person who's going to offer a solution, and that'll be the Antichrist. Fortunately, Christ is coming after him. He'll clean up the mess. But other than that, it's not going to get better in the long term, no matter who wins the election. It's not elections. It's not going to get better in the long term.
Let's talk a little bit about the American election real quick, Jacob. We'll talk about the farmers in the Netherlands at the end on backstage. But we have some interesting things going on. You have Trump on one side with the Republicans and meddling in with, of course, playing footsies, as you would say, with the rhinos.
Yes.
Then you have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who seems to be saying the right thing. He's talking about fentanyl, coming into the nation. The borders are wide open. He's not anti-immigration, but anti-illegal immigration.
Yes.
He's against what they've done in America, especially with the bank bailouts and all that. Seems to be hitting all the right notes. Now, he's got a history. He's got a family pedigree, but he's right about fentanyl. Let's talk about that for a moment. The borders, before we jump into Robert F. K. Jr. The fentanyl overdose, 279% since 2016, the largest amount of it's the biggest drug crisis we ever had. It kills more young people between 18 and 25 than any other disease or any other drug. It's skyrocketed, and we have Title 42 ending in about a week. Is Robert Kennedy Jr. right?
Well, of course he's right. Anybody with a fifth grade education who would look at the facts would be right. The Biden administration is functionally, with Mayorkas, they are pro-fentanyl. Fentanyl is the biggest killer of people from ages 18 to 45. Not just the biggest killing drug, it's the biggest killer. And these Chinese manufactured quantities of fentanyl are coming into the country with the de facto blessings of the Biden administration. That's what they're doing. They're actually bringing it in, or allowing it to be brought in with their lack of border policy. Concerning the illegal immigration, it's the same thing. It is the same exact thing. What is also interesting, as is always the case, the biggest victims of these policies are going to be minorities, Hispanics and especially Blacks. The fentanyl crisis is across the board, it's national, but it's particularly severe in the minority communities and especially the Black community. That's what really killed George Floyd. The autopsy showed he was not strangled by the policeman's knee on his neck. The autopsy showed he was under the influence of fentanyl and had some kind of cardiovascular failure that was fentanyl related. But it was easier to blame the cop than it was to blame the fentanyl. the minorities are the biggest victims. Secondly, the illegal immigrants, whose jobs are they going to take? They're going to take upstart jobs from Hispanic and Black Americans. Again, people who vote Democrat vote for their own death. They not only vote for the death of the country, they vote for their own death. They vote against their own economic and family interests. Now, rhinos are no better. Rhinos are no better.
Quick thing, Jacob, a lot of, and we talked about this at the beginning for the pre-recorded meeting, the Monroe Doctrine. You've been hearing a lot of that, 200 years coming up in December. What's your take on it? I know you were eager to talk a little bit about that today.
There's been a lot of talk about it on left-wing websites over the last week. One was called Democracy Now! I don't know why they call it that, because they don't seem to understand democracy. But it was a combination, it was revisionism. It was just pure revisionism, but it was a combination of the most idiotic stupidity imaginable with what must have been lies. Now, I admit that a lot of the people the people who are on there, some of them were stupid enough to believe the lies. They just don't know any better. They're too stupid. Okay. But they began with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders made a comparison between what Putin is doing in Eastern Europe and what the United States has done in Latin America in the name of the Monroe Doctrine. I asked anybody to show me one case where it's happened in the way Bernie Sanders has said. Bernie Sanders lied about the Monroe Doctrine. He said it was just American hegemony, saying that we're the main power in this new world, and it's not in our national interest to have anything outside of what we want in terms of government nations in the new world. That's what he said. The man, now he's an educated man. You can't just say he's stupid. He's not, although he's an older gentleman, he's not senile like Biden, and he's not stupid like Biden. He knows that he's lying. Let's begin with the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was something enacted to say that European or other powers could not establish new colonies in the New World.
Right.
But it happened with the special relationship. After the War of 1812, after the Battle of New Orleans, after the Battle of 1812, you had the beginning of the American-British special relationship under James Monroe. He was the last of the founding fathers to be a president. He was the final one, okay? You had a special relationship. Now, this was the early 19th century. In the 20th century, the special relationship between America and Britain saw America, USA, as the senior partner, Britain as the junior partner. In the 19th century, it was the opposite. Great Britain was the senior partner. The United States was the junior partner. Now, there was a hiatus during the Civil War because the textile industries of Britain were dependent on cotton from the American South. There was a hiatus in it, but the special relationship of the 19th century, United States played second fiddle to Britain. The roles were reversed in the 20th century. In other words, the United States was the regional policeman of Great Britain. America did not have the muscle to stand against European powers on its own. It was the British Navy, the Royal Navy, that had the real power to stop colonial expansion into the New World. The United States was simply playing second fiddle to Great Britain. They were acting on behalf of joint Anglo-American foreign policy. That's what it was. It wasn't the United States saying this. It was Great Britain saying this and taking its American cousin into a special relationship. That's what it was. So first of all, Sanders did not tell the truth about it. The United States could not have stood up to countries like France and Britain on their own at that time. They didn't have the Navy to do it. It took the Royal Navy to do that. Okay, the British had the Navy to do it. Britannia ruled the waves. That was the first. So he didn't tell the truth about it. Now let's look at the times the United States has intervened on in the name of the Monroe Doctrine. There has only ever been one time, and they didn't mention it, where the Monroe Doctrine was enacted as a basis for any kind of military conflict. It is when Mexico, with Santa Anna and those guys, owed France so much money that France tried to make Mexico a possession of France. And there was actually a terrestrial military conflict between the USA and the French. That was the only time the United States prevented Mexico from being taken over by France when France held the Mexican debt. That was the only time the Monroe Doctrine was ever enacted. There was talk of enacting it during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it never was enacted. Kennedy did not support the Bay of Pigs. There was no invasion of Cuba. The United States did not invade Nicaragua, it did not invade Venezuela, and it did not invade Cuba. And there was no Monroe Doctrine because Venezuela or Nicaragua or Cuba did not become possessions of European countries. It never happened. Well, let's look at the other times the United States intervened in Latin America. Well, you have times when it was purely because of crime. The first time was Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa attacked Colombia, New Mexico, and Pershing went down with an expeditionary force into Mexico, but it was not against Mexico. They were trying to get Pancho Villa and his banditos. Okay, it was because of crime. Yes. Noriega cooperated with the CIA for many years, but when it came to the cocaine trade, Bush and him fell out. The United States did invade Panama to get rid of Noriega, but they did not turn Panama into a colony, and they did not try to retain control of the Panama Canal. They simply did not want a drug addict who was responsible for the cocaine traffic coming into the United States, ruling Panama. It was because of crime. That's all. It was nothing to do with the Monroe Doctrine. The Johnson administration did invade the Dominican Republic because they were afraid it was going to become another Cuba. They did not want another Cuba in the Caribbean. That was the liberal Democrat Johnson administration who went into the Dominican, but it was not done in the name of the Monroe Doctrine. When the CIA, in collaboration with corporations allegedly such as ITT, deposed Allende in Chile, it was not done in the name of the Monroe Doctrine. Now, Allende made a mess of the economy of Chile. A lot of people were glad to see him go. No matter what you thought of Pinochet, the economy did improve under him, at least. I'm not saying I agree with what happened in Chile, but it did not take place in the name of the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine has only been invoked one time, and that concerned the France trying to colonize Mexico when they couldn't repay the debt, like what China's now done in Sri Lanka, in Ceylon, the same kind of thing. Okay, that was the only time. These people didn't know what they were talking about. They were just babbling. They did not know what they were talking. They had this stupid woman, some stupid woman, talking about the United States not liking China making inroads into countries in South America and having political and economic link. And she was tying this to the Monroe Doctrine. Well, First of all, China is the biggest human rights violator in the world. It occupies Tibet. It's threatening Taiwan. It is in conflict with India. And it has over 1 million people because of their ethnicity in concentration camps in Western China. It is the world's biggest polluter. It is responsible for COVID and a lot of other things. And it went in and basically seized a port in Ceylon and said it's ours for 99 years because you can't repay the debt. And she's objecting in the name of democracy to the United States not wanting a non-democratic country in our backyard taking control of these small economies with the Belt and Roads Initiative, I suppose. She didn't use that term, but that's what it comes to. These are stupid people. They don't know what the Monroe Doctrine is. They don't understand it. They didn't understand its historical genesis, and they don't understand the history of American, Latin American relations. Yet they say that democracy now. What, China's a democracy? You want a country that's got 1 million people in concentration camps that's destroying the global environment more than any other country? You want them in your backyard, and we're so wrong for wanting it? And what does this have to do with the Monroe Doctrine? Nothing. Nothing. Now, look, there have been things in American relations with South America and Latin America that I do not like. There definitely have been. But it's nothing to do with the Monroe Doctrine. Nothing. They're just too stupid to know any better. Pseudo-academic idiocy is what is being produced by the left.
Isn't it just another attack on America, another way to attack us, saying, because we were trying to prevent colonialism from Europe to come to the Americas because we wanted the American experiment to expand. But like you said, we only had to help out Mexico. And that
the
was
Americans were quite happy with Simon Bolivar bringing independence to South American countries. They just didn't want foreign countries colonizing the New World, colonizing Latin America. And of course, again, it was the British interest of wanting to contain the other continental powers who were rivalries in an imperial globe.
And Jacob, when you call it a kind of a correction towards the colonialization of Africa and South America by Spain and Europe and all these powers, and taking their resources. So the Monroe Doctrine.
They are too stupid to even know what the Monroe Doctrine is.
Yeah.
If they're attacking something that has benefited Latin America, that has never, ever been used except one time. And that was to protect the Latin American country from being taken over by a European one.
Yeah, Napoleon and his French.
And we ended up using it with Monroe bought a couple of things from France called the Louisiana Purchase, if I remember right.
Yeah, well, that was Jefferson. But the
United States fell under Monroe.
The United States did invade Cuba, and it did invade Puerto Rico in the war with Spain because those places were Spanish colonies. The United States gave Cuba its independence, and Puerto Rico didn't want independence. They wanted to remain American because it's in their economic interests. So what are these people even talking about? They don't know what they're talking about. But the mindless liberals will say it, and other mindless liberals will believe it.
Yeah, Democracy Now! Is a very leftist show. So they have that.
They're so far to the left. They don't know the left from the right. They're completely stupid. The people who run that thing maybe Sanders was lying. He's a politician. He was perhaps deliberately lying. The others were just morons.
Jacob, real quick before we switch topics, Robert F.K., any chance of him winning?
I would prefer him to Biden or Joe Obama or any of these other people. Remember, Robert F. Kennedy comes from the traditional Democratic Party of JFK, of Scoop Jackson, of Sam Nunn, of people like that. Kennedys were cold warriors. They were anti-communist. Although they were liberal, they were and pro-civil rights and so forth, they were anti-communist. They were also fiscal tax-cutting conservatives. They come from a Democratic Party that no longer exists. RFK is from that. Now, the name Kennedy is a iconic dynasty in the Democratic Party. But as soon as he went against the establishment over COVID, the left-wing media, I watched one report referring to him as not the son of Robert Kennedy or the nephew of JFK. They referred to him as anti-vax activist. Robert. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire like Donald Trump or like Elon Musk. If you go against the establishment, they'll go after you. It doesn't matter if you have the most watched program on cable news like Tucker Carlson or Bill O'Reilly. They will go after you. And it doesn't matter even if you're a Kennedy. They will go after you. the neo-feudalists, the globalists, those with the agenda will go after you no matter who you are. It's just like Stalin. Stalin, how could you go after Trotsky? Stalin had Trotsky murdered in Mexico. Trotsky was the founder of the Red Army. There would be no Soviet Union had there not been a Trotsky. But Stalin had him murdered. They'll go after they're the same. They have the same mentality.
Jacob, any have you changed at all your thoughts on Carlson and what happened with the exodus from Fox?
I am very, very much leaning to the perspective shared by Michael Savage. Michael Savage said they have Tucker Carlson in golden handcuffs. What tipped them against him, according to Michael Savage, was he exposed the myth, the lie, the widely propagated lie, propounded both by crooked rhinos like the daughter of Cheney and the Democratic Party, that this was some kind of an attempted coup d'etat against the United States. When the film that was provided to Tucker Carlson by the Speaker of the House proved it was not that. The police were welcoming them in and opening doors for them. It proved it was a lie. And the big outrage, according to Chuck Schumer and these other people and the rhinos, was not that the government lied and Garland lied and Biden lied and Harris lied. It was that you exposed the fact that they lied. This is the big crime. And that is why they want to get rid of Tucker and keep him quiet until after the next election. They've got him in golden handcuffs. They owe him $30 million. He can lose it. Newsmax, however, has offered him $100 million. So what's it to him? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well,
he took a lot less money to kind of be on Fox to kind of run his own thing, but eventually
Hannity was paid more than even though he had more viewers than Hannity. Hannity was paid a lot more than he was.
Yeah, that's
simply
crazy.
Because the left had organized boycotts of sponsors.
Yeah, absolutely. David, you have a different opinion about Robert F. Kennedy, real quick before we move on to it, but a bit of a different opinion about who he is and what he's done.
Well, he's a hardcore environmentalist. So he was caught with his hand in the cookie jar, taking money from the Koch brothers, and he was embarrassed by that. Also, if as a liberal he runs and was to be, he would have to have the left's agenda to become a candidate. So I could never vote for him. He's, but his radical environmentalism, I don't believe he's a pro-life supporter, even though he likes kids. But I just can't see me voting for him.
Any chance that there's a polarization of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party at the same time, with Trump polarizing one end of that party and then Robert F. K. polarizing the other half away from Biden and the extreme left?
Well, it would be a great idea, but Republicans are better at losing races and Democrats are better at staying together and winning races.
Yes.
So they're better at being crooked. Oh, Jacob, I just meant on Monroe because he was the one that actually signed the deal and then expanded the instructions for the purchase from 10 million to 15 that got the 288,000 acres. That's all because he was the chief negotiator there.
Oh, he was the negotiator during the Jefferson administration.
Yeah, Jefferson approved it, but Jefferson was trying to keep it down to 10 million, and when they offered everything, he took liberty and just gave them 15. And
it was 4 cents an acre.
And it was a sweetheart deal, man. It was the best land deal of the century. And then Napoleon was getting ready to take it back of my history, but Jefferson quickly submitted to Congress, got it approved, and said, "Occupy the territory." So too late.
Well, they needed money. Yep. Napoleon needed money. So, speaking of wars and rumors of wars, what do you make of it, Jacob? Ukrainian drone attack on the Kremlin? Not sure who did it, but escalation is inevitable. Moscow says the U.S. did it. Washington says Moscow did it. Ukraine's in the middle, having no way out. They're just being attacked left and right. What's your take on it? Provocation, probably at the end of the day, no matter who did
My
it.
first suspicion, and I cannot prove it, my first suspicion was that it was Putin who did it to justify further aggressive actions against Kiev and possibly Odessa. That is what he's trying to give himself a legitimate basis to carry out his further onslaught against the Ukrainians. That is my suspicion. I cannot prove otherwise. As far as the American support, to this moment, despite having received Leopard tanks and despite Ukrainians being trained to operate American M1s, they have not gotten any strategic aircraft. They've not even gotten old junk MiGs from Poland because Biden won't replenish the MiGs with F-16s, which is also not antiquated, but almost out of date. You know what I mean? It's not an F-35 or an F-22. They're not getting state-of-the-art stuff. Without a strategic air capacity, Ukraine cannot possibly win this war. They cannot possibly win this war. Russia is winning this war, howbeit at a very high cost. Russia is winning the war at a high cost.
Now, the trouble was that Ukraine was being primed and ready for a spring action, which is it seems to point out that they rallied back against Russia, especially in the east part of Ukraine. Moscow's warning of imminent and inevitable punishment over this, which they have started. At 7:00 Eastern time, we're getting some information that there was attacks from the Russians into eastern Ukraine, and not only involved obviously the counteroffensive movements, but Russian warships to the North Sea, which was kind of an interesting move there.
Yes.
And again, many warnings about we're heading to the abyss. Air sirens in the Ukraine and Kiev because of basically bombers, airborne bombers that are there. So more alerts, ships, airborne attacks. So
Moriel's own work in the Ukraine is run out of Krakow, Poland. And our work there is the distribution is handled or coordinated by a pastor who's a Jewish believer. I can only give his first name, Dima. Okay. And we get regular reports from Dima from inside the Ukraine of our own. And the media is not being totally truthful about what's really happening in the Ukraine. The Ukraine people are suffering brutally in many places. What Putin is doing is absolutely brutal. The media is trying to portray Russia as losing. Russia is not losing. It is winning, but at a very high cost. The economy of Russia has been hurt, and particularly in terms of inflation, now the declining value of the ruble, and also their foreign reserves are hurting. And they're being compelled to sell oil and natural gas at greatly reduced prices to China and India. That is all true. But their economy will still grow to 2.3% approximately this year. It will grow double the economy of the United States under Biden. Despite all the sanctions against Russia, its percentage growth of GDP will be twice that of the United States due to the policies of Biden. We're not being told the truth by the media.
That's right. David, what's your take on this? It's whoever did it, the provocation is there. Now you see Russia against Ukraine on the eastern side. Ukraine has done counteroffensive moves there, but it all seems to indicate, and this is a, and I have to account for this. This is a Russian secretary who's saying we're at the point of the abyss. We're on the verge of something that, at least from this political individual in Russia, that he doesn't want it. He doesn't want this horrible war. There are people that are against Putin in Russia. There are Russians who don't want this, but yes, seems to be being pushed further along, probably by everybody involved. But what's your take?
Well, whoever did it seemed to be incompetent. All they did was blow up the flag. They didn't even blow up the flag stick. So, to me, if it seems like that would have been a great thing to say, oh, this was somebody after Putin because it was there at the Kremlin, but it didn't hurt anything. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're a Ukrainian sending drones, you're going to make sure it's a big boom, not just a flash. So I can't imagine. And if it's CIA, those guys would have made sure there was a big boom. But I don't know. This seems kind of incompetent or like Jacob said, justification for doing more. I mean, just last week they sent 141 hypersonic missiles.
Yep.
And blew up civilian targets. That would have been devastating, and I think they even had one fall short and didn't go off. So I think I think the government's after that one to see what's going on with it. But for me, it's America is in abyss. Russia's everybody's rushing to go run down this hole. For what reason, I'm not sure, because we've expended all of our resources on this. Of course, not nuclear resources or any of our submarine missiles and things like this, but we couldn't fight a land war to save our lives. And our NATO allies, they probably wouldn't want to fight it either. So the world, Russia, I don't think has anything to lose by keep going. Taking the land bridge all the way.
Russia got the green light from Biden with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, when all you would have did was 3,000 troops in an advisory capacity to stop the Taliban from taking over. Biden, after all those trillions of dollars and thousands of casualties, gave the Taliban, who protected Al Qaeda, Afghanistan on a silver platter, and that gave the green light to Putin. That's the first thing. Again, Biden is surrounded by people who are not only corrupt but stupid. Let's remember that. A cheap politician general like Miley. I mean, a joke like Austin, Lloyd Austin, and the Secretary Blinken is. I don't know that man has the brain God gave him, but. Put that to one side. Let's look at the other dangerous beast on the horizon that they're not talking about too much. China would love to broker a peace between Ukraine and Russia to advance its own international prestige and standing on the global stage into Europe. It already brokered something between Iran and Saudi Arabia, albeit precariously. China is trying to insert itself into the diplomatic realm and outpace the United States as the global deal maker or peace broker. They're even talking now about wanting to host negotiations between Israel and Palestine, the Palestinians. This is China.
New power brokers.
That's right. And you have a castrated old clown in the White House surrounded by morons, career morons, and corruptocrats. What's going to stop them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly nothing's going to stop them from this side, because we've projected nothing but weakness everywhere. Even our allies are questioning Biden's competence around the world. It's common knowledge, that he's incompetent. So the world doesn't really want a nuclear war. It doesn't want war. It really wants peace. Howbeit, what it looks like, it'll be temporary. But there's no way out for Putin has always dreamed of retaking the Crimea and that whole land bridge. He needs that for ultimately an invasion of Israel and the Middle East.
The best thing the United States can do is something it tried and failed. Get rid of Erdogan, replace him with a moderate, and that would be pro-NATO, and close the Dardanelles to the Russian Navy. That would be the best thing. But again, you're dealing with an administration in Washington that is stupid, incompetent, and corrupt. So don't hold your breath.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you one thing on the drugs? Can I go back to that?
Yeah.
You know,
Quickly, yes.
there's kind of a thought, like you see in Canada that people are openly selling heroin, all these other things, all these other horrible, horrible drugs, even fentanyl. So they're creating this giant base of addicts. And at the same time, we're seeing the state there legalize the sale of these drugs. And now, and so I would ask the question, look, are these guys being allowed to create customers for the state that will then be able to control these people for all sorts of, for continued drug use? And in other words, they're going to have their customers and they'll be able to control them with basic living incomes, making them serfs to the state. And is that out of the realm?
Not at all. I mean, it's ultimately their plan is to control the masses. How do you control the masses? Well, you re-educate them and you easily control them through drugs. And that's been George Soros's dream. That's been George Soros's dream.
And it fits the book of Revelation said there would be an increase of pharmakia.
Yeah, but you see, let's forget this game is a long one. The British, that's how the British got Hong Kong. Wars. That is what the CIA did with the sweet rice, Air America in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War when they were flying heroin. The CIA was involved in flying heroin.
Jacob, is China repaying the West for their embarrassment of the opium wars and all that?
And they're thinking that's exactly what they're doing. You make a good point. They see it as their century of humiliation. Of course, the things that Ping is not talking about is the absolute apex of the century of humiliation was not Hong Kong. The absolute apex of the century of humiliation was Outer Manchuria, occupied by Russia, and it is still occupied by Russia to this very day. Yeah, Japan occupied Taiwan at one time, then called Formosa, and the British took Hong Kong, and the Portuguese got Macau and things of that nature. But the biggest chunk of Chinese real estate is still out of the hands of China. It is Outer Manchuria. Vladivostok was Chinese. That whole south east quadrant of Siberia, all the way up to Siberia, was Manchuria, was Chinese. The Russians took it. And you don't see Ping talking about that.
Not yet. Not yet, Jacob.
Not yet.
Let's talk about another war, and it's the war on children. You see it every week. We talk about it, and the purposes of us talking about it is not only bring awareness, but for Christians to pray and stand for righteousness, because it is involving all of our kids. It's involving our kids. It's involving our children's kids in the future. It involves people in our church and their kids and their grandkids. But Jacob, we got one war criminal, was Bill Clinton, and now his daughter is doing something similar to children that he's been famous for. Chelsea Clinton comes out in favor of porn for school kids, really? For books?
Chelsea Clinton, who has political ambitions of her own, her mother wanted her to run for Congress. This is absurd anyway, but Hillary Clinton's daughter, Chelsea, complained publicly that half of the books banned were LGBTQ, and this was her complaint. But she didn't talk about what was in the books. The left never talks about what's in the books. Cartoons of children performing oral sex on each other and anal sex on each other. These are cartoons for kids in these books, and she's saying that it's wrong to ban these books. It's book ban. I put out a comic book of somebody putting a bullet in a mother's head. Would that be right? No. But it wouldn't be right for me to put out a comic book of somebody putting a bullet in Bill Clinton's head or Hillary Clinton's head. It wouldn't be right for me to do that. No matter how much I detest them, I wouldn't put out a book like that. But when you put out a book for children engaged in unnatural acts and then complain that you're book banning and it's anti-democracy and anti-freedom and it's bigoted against homosexuals. She is as wicked and depraved as her mother. It reminds me of Queen Jezebel and Queen Athaliah, her daughter. You had Jezebel the queen, and then you had Athaliah. The daughter was in the character of the mother, the heart of a whore. It was in Jezebel and it was in Athaliah in the Old Testament. And now you got the same with Hillary and with Chelsea.
Yep, Marco, they're using health to kill babies in the womb. And now they're using health issues. You know, we're talking about this for people's health issues, you know, your gender concerns and all this. They're using this in books to educate children, but they're under the cover of health. They're putting out pornography and killing babies. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, because you really have. I mean, the only thing I hear is, you know, if you don't go through these procedures, if you don't go through, they're going to commit suicide. So
Yeah.
you have to save their lives. You have to save their lives by chopping them up and taking them in these radical bills, like the one in Oregon, that passed the Senate in Oregon, that basically, like Washington, like California, want to keep parents away from children that want to have these surgeries. So they're indoctrinating them, they're convincing them, and ultimately they're going to penalize you and criminalize you if you're a parent and get involved in your children's lives. Can you imagine that? That is exactly what they're doing.
And
When
yet,
you put pornography in and say it's health issues, you can peddle it.
Yeah.
Again, it's about the pharmaceutical industry.
yes.
Yep.
The whole trans thing is about, look, you're having customers for life. They're going to be dependent on medications, hormone therapy, surgeries, whatever it is for the rest of their lives. It's going to be ongoing. So they're, again,
Transfer of wealth.
comes back to the
I believe
Yes.
it's $1.1 million can be made from every kid that transitions, both in surgery and medication.
Mm.
So that you're
But
talking
when-
about them every single time they have an incentive to do it
Yeah.
because it's going to make money for the doctors and for the pharmacies.
AJ, I wonder
The
what
word of God
happens.
is to believe. You know, if the word of God is to be believed, every one of those legislators in Oregon, if you were to tie a millstone around their neck and throw them into the ocean, you'd be doing them a favor. It would be better for that to happen than to do what these wicked people have done. They have volunteered for the pit of hell. They've handed themselves over to eternal perdition.
You know, Jacob, we never hear about the ones that want to detransition. We never hear
Nope.
about them.
Now, those are suppressed by the media.
Yeah, and I think the insurance, Jay, I think you and I were talking about this one time. That the insurance won't cover detransition.
Correct. So,
yeah.
for example, they're using a drug that normally goes to cancer patients, but it can also be used for gender transitioning. If you have it used for cancer, it's $4,000 a dose. If you classify it under gender transition, they charge it at $9,000 for the same drug.
Man,
Just to give you an idea of the money-making scheme that it is.
but you know, if children have issues and they have difficulties in times of crisis, I think Canada really, really wants to help children because they want to put drag queens on these helplines to really talk to children in the Canadian youth. And I'm not kidding. Faye and Fluffy are going to help your children during the time of crisis. This is the name of two men who dress up like women and who believe that they are going to help kill children in kindergarten and in youth. They have a Prime, Amazon Prime show. They have different shows, Drag Queen Story Hour, time events, and all that stuff. And the Canadian broadcasters, they support this because there's a duo that really wants to help kids. And they have a helpline. What kind of a help can they get? I think you could be the judge of that. What kind of people don't like to use the word grooming, but what kind of
I was about
what
to
kind
say
of
the
influence?
hotline's number is probably 1-800-groomers.
Yeah,
Yes.
grooming. Yeah,
Yep.
it no. I mean, think about this. Years ago, let's say 5 years ago, no one even heard of Drag Queen Story Hour. There was many people who didn't even thought about it. Now it's mainline. Now it's prevalent. Now, Jacob, to your point last time, if you're in Canada and you protest like the pastor, you'll be thrown in jail.
That
The
pastor that
Mounties will
did
beat you up
protest,
and throw you in jail.
you remember that pastor
Yeah.
that protested? They've now found him
Yeah.
guilty. He's going to prison.
Calgary. Yeah,
Yep.
Calgary. Yeah.
He's going to prison. But, and then also they've just announced they're going after the truckers again. That's up there. They have new crimes, a new sheet of indictments. They're going to put those guys in prison now. They took their bank accounts. Now it's prison.
So U.S., Canada, David, you and I watched the Daniel Andrews. He's defending exposing young children to male adult entertainers in Victoria. I forgot what city this took place. There was a protest, and
Yeah,
he
it was
took
in-
time out of his busy schedule to address this at a hearing. So tell us a little more about that.
Well, basically, it was just parents and people not happy with the drag time story hour and they were just peacefully protesting about this is not acceptable for kids. We don't want you teaching this to our children. So he goes on a big rant calling them hateful, homophobic, violent, you name it. He went on and on and on and on, which basically shows you, look, he cares nothing for the children. He cares nothing for parents. The G word is most appropriate for him. The 1-800-groomers number, that's probably his number, Jay. But look, I was been thinking about who's it. I'm going to be devil's advocate here. I'm going to use his own arguing and reasoning against him. Okay, he's accusing everybody who's wanting to protect kids as being homophobic and trans and all the rest of it. Okay, who's he married to? He's married to a white woman, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're so trans accepting. Why aren't you married yourself to a trans? Would he have relations with a trans person? That sort of thing. I think he needs to take another holiday back down in the morning to Peninsula. I can recommend a good house for you, Danny boy, and it has a good set of stairs.
Good point, David.
Just make sure you take your wife with you.
Part to end trans hate, and he should divorce his wife, and he should definitely get in a relationship with a trans male. That way, he would be supporting the normalization, like a good little leftist.
Well, I mean, I don't think he has to divorce his wife. Couldn't he just add a sister-brother thing going on? I mean, everything's open,
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Hey, Jacob, do you think these grassroots boycotts of companies that support this kind of ideology are going to make any headways? I mean, Anheuser-Busch, Disney, obviously Bud Light, which is made by Anheuser-Busch, have made some semblance of there's people that don't support it and don't want it and their sales plummeted. But is it going to continue? What do you think?
I think it'll continue. I think it may even increase. But as I've been saying for some years, the most we can hope for is interim periods of respite. Then it will come back again even worse with more ferocity. It will continue that way until the advent of Antichrist. The only thing going to stop it ultimately is the return of Jesus. That's not to say we shouldn't support these things, but it is to say it's not futile, but it's only going to bring temporary periods of respite. I would point out that Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., objected to the boycotts of Bud Light, saying that Anheuser-Busch is an American icon and we shouldn't do it.
Wow.
Well, wait, this is after Donald Trump had the gay gala in Mar-a-Lago. This is what his son said. Well, first of all, his son doesn't know what he's talking about, Anheuser-Busch is a Belgian-owned company. It's not an American-owned company anymore and hasn't been for some time. That's to begin with. But coming from the Trump camp, this tells you that those Christians who naively think that there's going to be some kind of salvation if Trump is reelected, they're being very, very foolish and naive.
Yeah, the whole NAR movement, Trump's
Yes.
coming back, Trump prophecies, all that
Yes.
stuff. Speaking of the politicians promoting this, did you guys see the Rahm Emanuel, the prestige ambassador to Japan, bringing LGBTQ plus parades and all that to Japan? And it's becoming problematic. I mean, Japan is culturally against it, but they are promoting this and pushing this on behalf of helping more aid to Japan if you accept our LGBTQ plus. Jacob, you've been to Japan. Jay, you've been to Japan. You guys can speak about it more intelligently than I can. David, too. What's the stigma, and is it going to be accepted, and is it going to become just like another Western country, very accepting of what we call Western values today?
I don't believe that Japan, at this point in their history, can really even flirt with the idea of this Western openness as far as sexuality. I think the numbers of their birth rate paint a very, very bad picture for them.
Yes.
I think the fact that they are giving housing away in Japan for very low prices to people to try to keep towns alive.
Wow.
All of these things equal up to, we need to have a more conservative view on relationships between men and women. Therefore, this ideology that America is trying to push on Japan, for the people who have their eyes open, it's not acceptable. They need to go back even further to their conservative values. I can tell you that when I visited Japan, going to hot springs and public baths, there was nothing sexualized about it. And to sexualize bathhouses in Japan, it's not a cultural norm. Culturally, it is like what I could compare to a high school gym where you change and get into your clothes for PE, and to turn it into anything else, it's not acceptable in most Japanese minds, from what I can understand of the culture.
I agree with what James has said. I agree with what he said, but I would point out that this depraved policy is not new. This depraved foreign policy that you see with Emmanuel, who'd been the governor of Chicago and set the stage for Lightfoot for the crime to go through the roof. He's a bad man. Right. And his brother was one of the architects of Obamacare. Emmanuel's a bad man. But I was in Uganda. I was in Uganda when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State and flew into Uganda. Homosexuality is antithetical to the tribal Black African mind. It's not in their culture. It's just not there. Hillary Clinton threatened to withhold American aid to Uganda if they didn't change their laws concerning homosexuality, bearing in mind that Africa, Black Africa, including Uganda, was already demographically being decimated by AIDS. I guess Clinton and Obama didn't have enough dead blacks yet. They wanted to kill some more. That's the only thing I could make out of it. They wanted more dead blacks. That's the Democrats. What else would they want? But that's basically. I saw them do the same thing in Uganda with poor people. And again, like Japan, it is a cultural. It will be a cultural enigma. It is antithetical to their view of sexuality. It's just not something that they would do publicly.
To your point, Jacob, I would just like to point out one more thing about Japanese culture. So there is a history of tolerance of homosexuality, but it was in the upper class. The samurais and the lords could afford to do it. Everyone else, and you're talking about the 1% in that case.
Yes.
Everyone else, it was it was pretty, vanilla as far as their life and relationships.
Yes.
That's pretty interesting. We saw the story of the bathhouses, how they're being used right now by LGBTQ plus society there and some of the members there, and how people call the police because they're using the bathhouses in such a way of promoting sexual promiscuity. David, you were up there not too long ago. I don't know. Did you make it to Japan? Maybe you didn't. I
Yeah, I
forget.
did make. Yeah, I did make it to Japan. I saw a difference, like if you could look at Thailand. Okay, you see a lot of what the Thailand deem ladyboys. You see a lot of homosexuality there on the television, in the society, things like that. But I didn't see the same thing when I was in Japan. And I remember my father talking to me about his experience in Japan from over the years, is that those bathhouses were not sexual. Even if there was a woman that ran the place and kept it clean, it was not seen like a thing of sex. You know what I mean? It was just seen as like relaxing and getting clean and having a day at the spa, much like a woman goes to a spa or a man goes to a spa today. That's what it was like. It was not. He never said it was sexual. So, and from what I know, it's about the same now. I mean, even geisha girls were thought as being to be entertainers, but not sexual.
Very interesting. It's just unbelievable how much they want to export. They want to export these things into the world, and they are hell bent to bring it to every part of the world. And it's dominating, obviously, the Western culture, the Western thinking, sports, transgenderism, children, education, academia, you name it, it is touched. And now they're going after Japan, and it is embarrassing. That's the one thing that the Biden administration exports really well. It's their depravity. Depravity. We've got a few minutes. Jacob, we got about 4 minutes before we switch over. But I didn't want to miss this. This particular story was speaking of the LGBT plus community. Yuval Harari from the World Economic Forum, WF, talking about religion, but through AI, that AI will write sacred texts and create new religions. Very quickly, your take on it. It seems like AI is always involved with religion. They somehow mesh it in with faith, which is fascinating.
Harari, who was himself a homosexual, has said this before. He said that Silicon Valley is like the birthplace of a new religion. He's also an advisor to Schwab. So we have to understand that it is not just his own view. He is definitely somebody who is he is causing it to be absorbed, or he is using it as a segue into the World Economic Forum globalist agenda. This sexual dimension will go into the World Economic Forum, but also the new religion. The new religion will go into the World Economic Forum. And we're talking here again about AI, artificial intelligence. Well, our own readers know this, but perhaps it would be worth reading it just this one particular time. Okay. I saw another beast coming out of the earth who had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. Now the idea of the earth as opposed to the sea has to do with Israel. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast, that is the Antichrist, in his presence. He makes the earth and those who dwell on it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. Now, this is obviously a counterfeit of Elijah, what Elijah did. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth with the signs, which was given to him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And there was given to him breath to the image of the beast, that that image of the beast might even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. I have no doubt this is the religion of Antichrist in the making. What Harari is saying is the religion of Antichrist in the making. AI will cause robots, automatons to speak. You will have organic automatons, not using carbon in the way that we think, but possibly even clone tissue. Be that we can see a variety of scenarios and how this can come about. But plainly, AI can cause something to speak through its algorithms. And he's calling this a basis of a religion. I have no doubt that this is the basis of the religion of Antichrist in the making. And it is, again, integrated. It's integrated into the World Economic Forum neo-feudal agenda.
Yeah, they were even testing it in the University of Texas that AI can read brain, basically. Yes. Brain thought, they could actually, through blood flow and chemical reactions, they could actually interpret it with text. So fascinating.
You have to understand that is, remember, Jesus knew what was in men?
Yes.
That is Antichrist counterfeiting Christ, or the word of knowledge, the charismatic gift. Yes. Again, a satanic equivalent of it that will be technologically facilitated.
You know what's interesting, Jacob? Harari was in Israel not too long ago, just promoting the revolution there and citing people against Netanyahu. Does he reside in Israel? Is that his home?
Tel Aviv, yes.
Oh, okay. He was there inciting all these people come against Netanyahu. So he was very interested in Israel because the World Economic Forum was very interested in Israel. But the one group, and this is fascinating, that was vehemently against what he's saying about AI and religion was the Hasidic group, the Orthodox Hasidic group, who they have banned the use of AI for any of his members, any of the followers of that Hasidic sect. This is in New York based. But it comes across very different groups of Hasidic Jews throughout the world. The community in New York, obviously one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest ones. But they banned it, different than the Lubavitch. Lubavitch actually embraced technology.
Yeah, they're not Lubavitch. There are about 13 different Hasidic sects, and they believe their rabbi is the infallible reincarnation of Baal Shem Tov, of the Beshk. It's very complicated. These people are mystics and Gnostics. Whatever their rabbi says is what they're going to believe and do. This one particular group who is anti-AI, they're based a little bit in Brooklyn, but mainly in the Catskills. They have a town in the Catskill Mountains in New York, and that's their promised land. And they're opposed to it. But you will find other Orthodox Jews opposed to it as well. But mainly them, yes.
Fascinating religion, AI, Israel, and you could not have, even if we tried.
That's right.
We couldn't. The Bible speaks to that very, very clear. So that's for catching up. We invite all of our viewers, and there's a lot of them today. So we appreciate you coming in and listening and joining us and catching up. You're a big part of what we do and why we do it, and expressing what the Bible says, especially in the current times in which we live in. So we're going to leave YouTube and Facebook, and we invite you to come over to Rumble, memorialtv.org, memorial.tv, or to stay on Vimeo or Telegram. But we do want you to join us on memorial.tv, memorialtv.org. And we do want you to come to Rumble and ask questions. We're going to take some questions for Jacob and David on backstage. So we're going to finish your catching up, jump over from YouTube and Facebook into the other platforms. If you're already there, that's great. But if you're not, jump over there now. We'll be taking questions, and we'll be talking about a very interesting thing. Netherlands, King Charles coronation tomorrow. Very interesting stuff. So you might want to hear what Jacob has to say and David has to say. God bless you guys. We'll see you on backstage.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.